Have I failed in life? What am I doing to rebuild myself and my image? At January 1st of 2026, I am 29 years old. Well, January 5th, 2026. My birthday is in September. Um, and that is quite interesting, to say the least. Um, what have I accomplished so far in this day and age in my life? Well, I'll be honest. My life has been kind of a whirlwind since 2023. 2023 was one of the hardest years of my life. I'm not going to lie. And my life has not been, it was kind of like a changing point in my life, if you will. And my life has not been normal since then. Normal to say, not normal to say the least. Yet at the same time, I have traveled a lot, like a lot since then. I've taken trips that I've never taken before, especially in 24. And I mean, I went all the way to New Zealand, for crying out loud. I went all the way to New Zealand. That was a trip I wanted to take my whole life. Like my whole life, I wanted to go to New Zealand, and I ended up going out to New Zealand in February of 2024, the end of February 2024. I went all the way to Chile in early February 2024. Two countries I've always wanted to visit. I checked them both off my bucket list between February and March 24, New Zealand and Chile. And I'm proud that I did that. And also at the same time, I checked off Puerto Rico, and I actually lived there for 9 months. At the same time, I revisited, I went back to Vegas, visited Area 51, the gate of Area 51, we obviously can't go in. I took trips that I never thought I'd take before, like I went to Houston, Austin, Dallas, like I checked out all those three places. I went downtown Atlanta again. I did all the normal roundabouts, Orlando, Miami, Tampa. I spent time at Los Angeles International Airport watching the biggest aircraft in the world take off and go to their destinations around the world. I went back to San Diego, and I can think of many, many trips that I have taken. I returned to Oklahoma City. I returned to Fayetteville. I returned to Arkansas. And I'm proud of these trips that I've taken. I really am. But at the same time, when I can say, like, what have I accomplished in my life? Well, I did start a business which kind of floundered a couple of times, actually. I have not been a very successful businessman, but I have been self-employed in my life for a period of time. And I'm proud to have said that I've been self-employed for a period of time. And at the same time, though that was never quite successful, I just have to look at myself today and just like say, where am I at? What have I actually accomplished? What can if I were to die today, what kind of legacy would I have left behind? At my age, I have no kids, have no wife, have no girlfriend, none of that. I got none of that. And at the same time, like if I were to die today, what would people remember about me? What would people, think about Javier? Will you remember me as a kind person? Will you remember me as a person that, that loved others unconditionally? Will you remember me as a person that traveled to all these exotic and amazing places, or who has been to 49 states in this country, which I did actually successfully complete in 2022, August 2022, when I hit Alaska. That was my 49th state. And honestly, that's my biggest legacy that I have left, is how much I've traveled. I have all that on I have photos from every state I've been to on my Instagram. I did my revisit to Kentucky to visit the Ark in February 25. And I'm proud of that. I really am. I'm proud of all of that. And as of today, I have photos, I have photography and videos, I have photography and or videos from 49 U.S. states, the exception being Nebraska. And that's a funny exception due to the fact that on my journey in 2021, the summer of July 21, I actually managed to visit every state that surrounds Nebraska without touching Nebraska. So I guess my biggest legacy might just be travel. My biggest legacy might just be, I have been to 49 states plus New Zealand plus Puerto Rico plus, Australia plus, French Polynesian Islands plus Mexico plus Chile plus Canada, including Alaska and Hawaii, with pictures and videos of all of that stuff, which is pretty cool. It's a lot more than many people have done in their lifetime. But at the same time, my legacy work-wise is, briefly, I don't even want to say briefly, just kind of on and off, running a business which was not very successful. Of my legacy, person-wise, would be like, I would probably want to say, trying to be kind to everybody that I could, trying to, learn to love people unconditionally, whether I agree with them or not. Trying to be as loving of a person as possible, and at the same time treating people the way I want to be treated. Recognizing that every person has feelings, has emotions, has values, has their own life, their own struggles, their own pains, their own hurts, their own wants. And at the end of the day, I managed to do all that. I have learned a lot about religion. I've learned a lot about Christianity. I became a Christian in 2012 after hearing a testimony from Mr. Larry Stump, who I used to attend a church with way back in like 2011, 2012, post high school. And I remember when he told me his testimony, he got saved at a certain day, at a certain time, etc., etc., etc. And I remember that just hitting me. That hit me hard. And he remembered the moment, the day, the hour, the time of year that he got saved, that Jesus Christ saved him. And that really hit me hard. And I was really glad that he shared that testimony, because I was after we got into a fight. I was fighting with him about whether Allah is the true God or whether Jehovah's Witnesses were true. And this was me, early 2012. And then my story from there. I've told my story from there. I became very, very religious. I became really, really into the Christian faith, got really involved in conservative politics, Republican politics, became really Christian right wing, to the point where I literally went out and protested gay people and all that stuff, and protested abortion too, but then after that, I saw the error in some of those ways and I toned that down drastically. And now today I actively oppose a lot of the stuff that I used to support, at one point in my life. And, at the end of the day, a lot of people's views evolve, views change, my views changed in a lot of ways. So I personally evolved a lot in my life, in my personal life, if you will. I have the legacy of living on my own, in multiple different places, in Florida, in Utah, Florida and Utah and Puerto Rico especially. Obviously, I lived with my grandmother for a period of time in Massachusetts, obviously my family lived in Virginia and in different places, in New Jersey for a little while. So I've lived around the country, and so I have the experience, the legacy of living on my own. I have the experience and legacy of knowing what it's like to be self-employed, but also to work hard. I have spent a lot of time in my life working hard. I spent many years of my life working hard. And at the same time, I worked, at an ice cream shop. I worked at 2 grocery stores. At the end of, the grocery store that the grocery store that I worked at in 2023, it had a bad, very, very unfortunate and sad experience, which actually changed my whole life. And honestly, I have never been the same since that experience. But that was 23, and I worked at that grocery store. I worked at a smoothie place in St. Pete. I worked at another grocery store in Virginia. I worked at, an ice cream shop in Massachusetts for 3 years. And I've done some of these jobs like for years on end, like a year, 2 years, 3 years, etc., etc. And besides that, I've held many other jobs. So I remember my first job was at a cafe in Virginia, and I worked there for like 8 months. So I have a work life experience, an independent. I have a workforce life experience, an independent work life experience. I have travel experience. I have experience of learning about humanity, learning about politics, learning about religion, learning about Christianity, and learning about, having what it was like to have a change of heart in a lot of my views. Um, and at the end of the day, my big value is just to, at this point, just to love people and to try my best to love people the best way that I could. And at the same time, to be passionate and bold, like I've always been bold and passionate. I've always been bold and passionate, but to be passionate and bold about the things that I believe, the things that I stand for, the things that I, know that I believe and that I want to stand for and fight for unapologetically. And at the same time, to hold on to the most important thing in the universe, which is my faith in Christ, faith in Jesus Christ, something that I hold on to for dear life because I believe that he is the only way to heaven, the only way to God, the only way to the kingdom of heaven. Does that mean being deeply involved in heavily religious circles and Christianity and all that stuff? It doesn't quite mean that. But at the same time, it is good to, it is good to have faith and to recognize that he really is the one that died for my sins. And that's a belief that I hold very close to my heart. And that's a belief that I continue to hold on to. Working on, so at the same time, though I have done all this stuff in my life and left this kind of legacy at my age here in January 5th of 2026, though I have done all this stuff and left this kind of legacy at my age in January 5th of 2026, I recognize that I'm only getting older, and we are all only getting older. And that's just a fact and reality of life, is that we're all getting older. I don't know what my future holds. I realize that I am still kind of young, yes, but I don't know if I'm going to have kids in my life. I don't know if I'm ever going to get married. I have no idea. I literally have no idea. At the end of the day, time will only tell. Time will only tell. What my future is with my love life, or if not I'm ever going to have kids or whatever. I have expressed repeatedly that I would like to have just one child that I can call mine, that I can say, this is what I'm leaving behind in this world. And I don't know if that's going to happen or not, but we will see what happens. I don't know if that's going to happen, but we will only see. At the same time, I'm focusing a lot on trying to rebuild my self-image, both in person and on social media. At the end of the day, I was just looking through my YouTube channel, which has videos going back all the way till all the way back to 2016. Can you believe it? I have videos going all the way back on my YouTube channel to 2016, and I remember that's when I first started doing YouTube. This was even before I ended up moving to Utah the first time. And I remember this was like, I'm just looking back. I have everything on here. I got a whole blog on here. That's why I called it Javier Blog 208, which now is up to 404 subscribers. 404 subscribers, and I know for a fact some of them are dead. That's very few of them, but at least one or two of them are dead. And that's just what it is. People pass away, people die, people exit this earth, and at the end of the day, I'm just recognizing that as of today, I am dealing with multiple parts of myself that I have to figure out how I'm going to combine. Then I have to figure out how I'm going to, put together, if you will, or merge together. There's a big part of me that likes, there's some personal parts about me that I don't want to discuss publicly, but there's a part of me that loves aviation. There's a part of me that, that acknowledges my faith in God, that wants to talk about religion and my faith in Christianity and all that stuff. There's a part of me that knows about, airline history. There's a part of me that talks about travel and travel experiences. There's a part of me that wants to talk politics and express my views boldly and unapologetically. There's a part of me that, wants to talk about other personal matters. And there's another part of me that wants to do talks just like this, be having real talk about life, real talk about experiences. And at the same time, that's really where we are right now. There's multiple different parts of me, and I'm trying to kind of like reflect that all on YouTube, if you will, reflect that all on my YouTube channel. I want to be a person that does a political podcast. Like I want to devote a big part of my time to politics and to talking politics and to talking about my political belief and political views, and trying to speak to others about it very boldly. There's a big part about me that wants to continue to talk about my faith in God and my faith in Christianity and my faith in Christ. There's a part about me that wants to talk about very personal matters that I have not, that I don't want to address publicly. There's a part of me that just, wants to talk about travel and travel blogs and aviation. And there's parts of me, like I said, that wants to do talks like these, real person to person, heart to heart talks like these. And just to open up and to tell you guys about myself, and just to kind of introduce you guys to me, just introduce you guys to myself. The real me, the person that's evolving on the daily, that's not a person that's not complete yet, the person that is continuing to evolve, continuing to change, and continuing to find new answers, have new worldviews, seek new worldviews, etc., etc., etc. And that's just what it is. And I just have to ask myself the question, how am I going to merge all these parts of me together? How am I going to merge them? Because they're so different. Like, these are all so different, Travel is different than religion and politics, Politics is different than travel. Travel blogs, at the end of the day, heart-to-heart talks, maybe they can merge with politics a little bit, but it's kind of hard to do that, Other parts of me that are more personal, at the end of the day, it's kind of hard to merge with these. So I've been thinking about maybe the possibility of creating multiple YouTube channels, like multiple ones. I'm talking like 5 different ones, and focus each channel on a different topic. Focus each channel on a different version of me, a different version of myself, and ultimately just put it all together and see what will come of it. And that's just kind of where I am today, at the same time, now that I've been having more time just to think and put my thoughts out there and just do this stuff, etc., etc., etc. So as of today, as you know, I have my channel, Javier's Blog 208. I have my, channel, Javier's Blog 208. I have my Let's Talk About It with Javier blog on Facebook. That is my political blog on Facebook. I have another channel on I have another YouTube channel where I talk only about politics, which only has 3 subscribers at the moment. That is David J. Lopez. I only talk politics on there. And I'm going to be building, and my plan is to build a few more, and to just like kind of compete these different versions of myself to see how I can merge them together and which one will win out, etc., etc. But pretty much that's where I am today. And, I want to keep talking to you about myself, more about myself, my life, my blogs, my views, my experiences, everything. And I look forward to, having people continue to follow me and follow up. And that's just what I want to express and talk about, etc., etc., etc. And at the end of the day, that's just kind of where I am and where I stand today. And, at the end of the day, one thing I want to mention is our life is a movie. All of our lives are a movie. Think about yourself as an actor in this life. We are all actors in this life. We all put on a different face when we're getting in front of the public than we do when we're in private. It's one of the reasons I hate the workforce, actually. Like, one of the reasons I abhor and despise the workforce, especially after my experiences in 2023. It was those experiences that reminded me how fake people are in public, how fake smiles are when people are in their workforce or whatever, and how they're not really, they don't actually care about you. They'll smile at you, but they don't actually care about you as a person. So I saw and exposed a lot of fakeness in my life. And at the end of the day, we are all, our lives are all just a movie at the end of the day. So I'm going to be, like I said, I'm going to be building these different versions of myself. I'm going to be putting them all on YouTube and kind of like figuring out how I can put them all together and merge them all into one, just to give you guys myself, my full authentic self, and seeing where my future blogs will go, my future, talks will go, political talks, religious talks, travel talks, aviation talks, personal talks, etc., 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 and just kind of experience and heart-to-heart talks, especially and seeing where it will all go. And continuing to have the time to just think and focus on yourself is so important and so necessary. And it's just something that we all need to, that's so important for us to have if we want to advance as human beings. I guess that's all for now, but I just appreciate you guys all watching this. I got more to talk about. I got a lot to say on politics, a lot to say on everything, world happenings, etc., etc., etc. I'm aiming to start a podcast. I'm aiming to start furthering my blogs, my life blogs and everything in life. And that's kind of what I'm aiming for, where I am right now. This is my story of today. And ultimately, it's God that has me, God that sustains me. And he gets all the glory for sustaining me, taking care of me up to this point. Thank you for watching. And this is Javier, tuning out.